I did not plan to live on a tugboat. I did not plan anything after the phones went quiet, and the streets turned into a slow-moving trap. I ended up here because water puts distance between problems, and because most people panic in straight lines. The tug was tied up at the far end of the harbor, half hidden behind a row of work barges and a pile of rusted fenders. The harbor office used to run it for short pushes, moving small ships in and out. Nothing fancy. Wide beam, heavy rubber tires hung along the sides, squat wheelhouse, loud diesel smell baked into the deck plates. The name on the stern was Sable. The paint looked tired, but the hull looked honest. I climbed aboard the first time with a backpack, a small toolbox, and a mouthful of dry fear that I refused to swallow. The dock boards creaked under my weight. Every noise carried, even in daylight. I paused twice, listening for shouts, gunshots, engines, anything human. The only sound was the harbor, gulls, distant water slap, wind sliding past warehouse corners. The wheelhouse door was locked, but it was a basic lock, and the glass was old. I did not smash anything. Noise brings attention. I worked the back window latch with a thin piece of metal from my bag and slid it open one slow inch at a time. The inside smelled of old coffee, diesel, and damp life jackets. I stepped in, shut the window, and sat still for a full minute, letting my eyes adjust, letting my ears tell me if I had just invited company. Nothing moved. The ignition keys were not in the panel. No surprise. People grab keys first when the world goes sideways. I checked the drawers. I checked the little shelf by the radio. I checked the chart table. Nothing. I found a spare key ring in a locker under a pile of oily rags. It had 3 keys, all worn. One fit the wheelhouse door. One fit the engine room hatch. The third key did not matter in that moment. I went down into the engine room with a flashlight held tight under my chin. The air down there was thick. It felt warmer, trapped. The engine block sat in the center, dark and quiet, belts still, hoses stiff. I put my hand on the main fuel line and followed it with my fingers to the filters. I checked the sight glass on the day tank. Not full, not empty, enough to move. I checked the oil level. I checked the coolant reservoir. All of it looked used, but not ruined. I climbed back up, shut the hatch, and went straight for the harbor office building on the dock. The glass doors were smashed, the inside tossed. Someone had already done the quick grab. I did not waste time searching drawers that were already empty. I took what mattered from the floor and the corners. A coil of line, 2 flares in a cracked red case, a box of work gloves, a handheld spotlight with dead batteries, a clipboard with a plastic cover that I tore off and kept as a rain shield for a bundle later. Back on the tug, I moved through every compartment and made a map in my head. Storage under benches, locker space, a narrow berth, a tiny galley that ran on propane, but the tank was gone. A freshwater tank with a fill cap on deck. The gauge on it was low, maybe a quarter. I tasted the water from the sink. Metallic, stale, but not rotten. I did not drink more than a mouthful. I poured the rest out. Then I sat in the wheelhouse and looked at the harbor through the front windows, and I made myself choose. Stay tied up and wait for someone to come down the dock, or get off the dock entirely and turn the tug into a floating problem that takes effort to reach. I chose distance. The anchor was in its cradle, chain fed down into the locker. The tug had a proper windlass. That was the first real gift it gave me. I started the battery switch. The panel lights came on, dim but alive. I said a quiet thank you to nobody. Then I followed the start procedure from memory and from old habits. hand on the throttle, eyes on the gauges. The engine turned over with a slow grind, then caught hard. The whole boat shuddered. The sound filled the harbor and bounced off the warehouses. I kept my hand on the kill switch for a full 10 seconds, ready to shut it down if I saw movement on the docks. No one came running. That did not mean no one heard. It meant no one close had the ability to answer fast. I untied lines with the engine idling, working one knot at a time, keeping my head up. A loose line in the water can foul a prop. A fouled prop can strand a person in the wrong place. I shoved off with a boat hook and eased the tug away from the dock. The rudder responded. The throttle responded. The tug moved into open water with the slow confidence of something built for work. I did not go far. I stayed inside the harbor mouth, beyond easy shouting distance, beyond a casual swim, beyond anyone who did not have a boat. I watched the shoreline while I moved. The city side of the harbor was full of broken shapes and quiet streets. The industrial side had fenced yards and stacked containers. I saw no trucks moving. I saw no forklifts. I saw smoke in one spot farther inland, low and dirty. I dropped anchor near a channel marker, not in the main lane, not where a drifting boat would pin me. I paid out chain until I felt it bite. I backed down gently to set it. The tug held. That moment, when the engine noise dropped and the boat settled into a new stillness, felt wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because I was alone. Right because the dock was behind me and I had space around my hull. The first night, I did not sleep much. I moved in loops, wheelhouse to deck, deck to stern, stern to engine room to wheelhouse. I checked the anchor line angle with my flashlight. I listened for splashes. I listened for outboard engines. I listened for voices. I watched the shoreline until my eyes hurt. Then I forced myself to look away and check the tug again, because staring does not fix anything. At some point after midnight, the wind shifted and the tug swung on its anchor. The bow pointed toward the docks again. The lights on shore were dead, but the moon gave enough to see outlines. I noticed movement near the harbor office building. Not fast, not purposeful. A person shape, then another. Both staggered through the debris near the door. No flashlights, no conversation, no clean walking. I stayed low behind the wheelhouse window frame and watched. The figures drifted along the dock edge, bumping into posts, turning when they hit something, wandering again. One stepped off the dock and fell into the water with a splash. The sound carried. I waited for someone to react. No one did. The figure thrashed for a minute, then went quiet, then floated, face down. The other figure kept walking. I did not feel brave. I felt trapped by reality. If the infected could wander down there, then eventually someone with a working brain could wander down there too. The difference was a working brain can plan. Morning came gray and cold. The harbor water looked oily, a thin sheen in places, a mix of fuel residue and old runoff. I boiled a cup of the stale tank water in a small pot I found in the galley. The smell of hot metal did not help. I drank half, then stopped and capped the rest. Water was now the first rule of my life. I spent the next hours doing chores that kept me alive. I ran the engine for 20 minutes to keep the batteries charged, then shut it down and checked the fuel gauge. I pumped the bilge. I wiped down the wheelhouse windows and then covered them again with a curtain I made from an old towel and zip ties, leaving a narrow viewing slit. I found a bucket and a spare length of line and built a simple water drop for washing, using harbor water for cleaning and saving tank water for drinking only. Food was a smaller problem. for the moment. The tug had old emergency rations in a locker. Crackers, peanut butter packets, a couple of canned stews. Not enough for weeks, but enough for days. I did not eat a full meal. I ate to stop the shakiness in my hands. Then I moved again. I needed a smaller boat. The tug was safe because it was out here, but everything I needed existed on shore. Tools, batteries, water containers, fuel. The tug had no magic supply. Without a way to move quietly back and forth, I would end up running the tug to chase resources, and running the tug meant noise and fuel loss. I scanned the harbor for a dinghy. There were two near a private marina, tied to a floating dock. The dock sat tucked inside a breakwater where the water stayed calmer. The marina gate on land was open and bent. I did not see people moving down there, but I saw plenty of trash on the walkways. Someone had already looted the easy stuff. I waited until late morning, when the light was strong enough to show shadows clearly. And then I started the tug and moved slow toward the marina. I kept the throttle low. I steered wide, avoiding the shallow spots. I kept my eyes on the docks and the parking lot beyond. The dinghy I wanted was a small aluminum skiff, not a soft inflatable. Inflatable boats pop, an aluminum skiff dense but floats. It had oars inside and a simple outboard bracket, but no motor. Perfect, quiet. I brought the tug close enough to drift alongside the floating dock without touching hard. I looped a line around a cleat and held tension with my hands, no sudden pulls. I stepped onto the dock, crouched, and moved fast. The dock floated under me, soft and unstable. I did not run. I lifted the skiff's bow with both hands and slid it free. It scraped the dock and made a short scream of metal. I froze. I looked at the shore. Nothing moved. I dragged the skiff alongside the tug and tied it off with a painter line. Then I went back and took the oars, a spare life jacket, and a small plastic fuel tank that was empty. I did not take more. Greed gets a person stuck in a bad place. I pushed off, started the tug, and returned to my anchor spot. The skiff rode behind me, slapping water. I shortened the tow line until the skiff stopped swinging. I kept the tug slow. I watched the marina until it fell out of view. That afternoon, I rigged the skiff so I could drop into it from the tug without falling into the water. I tied a short ladder from spare rope and a piece of wood. I tested it twice. Harbor water gets inside everything. It gets inside clothes, shoes, cuts, and then the body starts losing options. By the second night, the tug felt less unknown. I learned its noises, a creak under the forward deck when the hull rocked, a rattle in the wheelhouse window frame when wind hit from the port side, the soft click of the anchor chain when the tug swung. All of those sounds could hide a new sound, so I stayed strict. I shut down anything that could make noise on its own. I kept tools tied down. I kept loose gear in bins. I slept in short stretches. I woke to check the shoreline. I woke to check the anchor. I woke to check the skiff, making sure no line had slipped and no driftwood had tangled it. On the third day, I went to shore for water containers. I picked dawn, when the light was low but enough to see. The water was calm, and the harbor held a quiet that felt temporary. I rowed the skiff in, keeping the oars low so they did not clack on the rowlocks. The tug sat behind me, dark and still, a squat silhouette that did not look valuable from far away. I aimed for a maintenance shed near the breakwater. The shed used to store ropes, fenders, paint, and safety gear. The door was half open. I stepped inside and used my flashlight for 1 second, just enough to get the layout, then shut it off and let my eyes work. I found 2 5-gallon water jugs under a shelf. One smelled of bleach. That was fine. I found a roll of tape, a box of zip ties, a set of spare filters for a portable pump, and a cheap hand pump. I found a rain poncho. I found a coil of smaller line. I carried it all in 2 trips, moving slow, listening between each movement. Outside, the breakwater rocks were damp and slick. I watched the shoreline while I loaded the skiff. A gull landed on a trash pile and screamed at something unseen. The sound made me stop with my hands on the jug handle. If anything on land heard that gull, it might come to check. I stood still until the gull flew off. I pushed off and rowed back, keeping my strokes shallow. I did not look over my shoulder constantly. I picked landmarks and trusted my direction. Panic rowing wastes energy and makes noise. Back aboard the tug, I filled the jugs with tank water and sealed them, marking one with tape for drinking only. That was a lie to myself in a way. The tank water was limited. Rain would become the real plan. I stretched the poncho between 2 rails and ran a line down to a bucket. It was crude, but crude works when it rains. Fuel was next. Fuel was the hard one because fuel is heavy and loud and dangerous, and everybody wants it. The tug burned diesel. Most of the small boats in the marina used gasoline. I could not use gasoline in the tug. I needed diesel cans, and I needed a safe place to siphon from something bigger without getting caught doing it. I spent that day scouting with binoculars. I saw a small fuel dock on the far side of the harbor with 2 big tanks and a pump station. The place looked abandoned. The gate was open. The dock was empty. The pump station door hung crooked. That screamed trap, but traps require people to run them. People were a question mark now. I also saw another tug farther up the channel, half grounded near a mudflat. It looked damaged, maybe rammed. Its cabin windows were broken. That one was a dead end. That evening, close to dusk, I saw the first signal. It was a flicker from shore, a sharp flash, then another. Not a random reflection. It was aimed. It came from the shadow line between 2 warehouses near the old ferry terminal. I raised the binoculars and held them steady against the window frame. A man stood in the open for half a second, then stepped back. He held something flat and reflective, maybe a mirror, maybe a piece of metal. He flashed it again, 3 quick bursts. Then he dropped low and crawled behind a concrete barrier. I pulled the binoculars down and stared at the spot without magnification. The distance made everything small. The man could be anyone, a survivor, a thief, a person with a plan. The signal could be a plea or a lure. I did not answer. I did not wave. I did not turn on a light. I stayed still and watched until the light faded, and the shoreline became a strip of dark shapes. That night I made a rule, and I said it out loud so it felt real. No contact from the tug. Contact only from the skiff, and only after I understand what I am looking at. The next day I watched that same spot for hours. Nothing moved. No more flashes. No figure. That made it worse because a person who gives up fast either died or decided a different approach. I worked anyway. I checked the anchor chain for chafe where it met the bow roller. I wrapped a piece of old hose around a section and tied it in place with line. I cleaned the engine air filter. I sorted the locker supplies into bins and wrote labels on tape. Water, food, tools, medical. That last bin was thin. A few bandages, antiseptic wipes, a bottle of pain reliever, not much else. Late afternoon, the wind picked up. The tug swung wider on its anchor, pulling the chain at a new angle. The chain clicked and groaned. I tightened the windlass brake a fraction. I watched the bow dip and rise. Harbor chop is small but constant. Constant means wear. Dusk came again. I sat in the wheelhouse with binoculars on my lap and a flare within reach, not because I wanted to use it, but because having it nearby kept my movements calm. The signal came again. Same place. This time it was not a mirror flash. It was a small light, covered and uncovered in a steady pattern. 3 on, 3 off, then a pause, then again. The man stepped out long enough for me to see his outline clearly. He wore a dark jacket and a backpack. He raised both arms and held them up, then dropped low again. I tracked him with the binoculars until he disappeared behind the barrier. Then I scanned the area around him. I looked for other movement. I looked for a second person. I looked for the faint glow of another light. I looked for the wrong kind of stillness, the kind that hides a group waiting. I saw nothing. I did not answer. I stayed quiet. Then I did something that surprised me. I wrote down what I saw on a scrap of paper. Time, location, pattern. It was not for history. It was for my own brain, so fear could not rewrite the details later. That night, after full dark, I heard an outboard engine in the distance. Not close, somewhere beyond the breakwater. The sound came and went, the way small motors do when the wind carries it. I did not go to the deck. I stayed inside the wheelhouse and listened through the glass. I kept the flashlight off. I did not touch the radio. I did not want light spilling out. The outboard noise faded. Then, far off, I heard shouting. Not words I could make out, just the rise and fall of human voices, then silence, then another burst. I stayed still until the harbor went back to its normal sounds. On the 5th day, I forced myself to deal with the fuel dock problem. If I waited until my tank was low, I would end up making dumb choices. I picked mid-morning again. I rowed the skiff toward the fuel dock, staying close to the breakwater rocks where shadows broke up my movement. The fuel dock smelled strong, even from the water. Diesel and old spill. I tied the skiff under the dock, using the shadow line to hide it. Then I climbed up the ladder on the dock's side, moving slow so the metal did not ring. The pump station was vandalized. The keypad ripped off, the display smashed. The door to the equipment room was open, and inside I found what I hoped to find and what I did not want to find. I found a manual hand pump with a hose. I found 2 metal jerry cans, both empty. I also found bloodstains on the floor, dried dark. I did not step into them. I stepped around and kept moving. The big diesel tank had a fill port and a drain valve. I did not mess with valves I did not understand. I used the hand pump. I fed the hose into the tank through a service opening and pumped slow, keeping the hose steady so it did not scrape. Diesel began to flow into the jerry can with a muted glug. The sound felt loud in my head. I stopped twice to listen. Nothing moved outside. I filled 1 can, then half of the second. I did not fill both to the top. Full cans are heavy. Heavy cans make noise and slow a person down. I sealed them, wiped the outside with a rag, and carried them to the dock edge. I lowered them into the skiff using a rope sling and a slow hand-over-hand drop. On my way back, I saw the first real sign of other survivors working the harbor. A shopping cart sat overturned near the gate. Someone had used it to haul something heavy. The tracks in the dust showed it had rolled recently. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. That smell does not last long outdoors. Someone had been here not long before me. I did not linger. I got in the skiff and rowed away with the diesel sloshing under the bow. I kept my strokes clean and quiet. I kept my eyes on the shoreline. A person can hide behind a dumpster and wait for the return trip. I made it back to the tug without trouble, but my calm was thinner. I hoisted the cans aboard and stowed them low in the engine room, secured so they could not tip. I smelled my hands and changed gloves. Diesel smell clings, and smell can carry when wind is wrong. That evening, the signaling man did not appear. Dusk slid into dark with no flashes. I found myself watching the spot anyway, unable to stop. I hated that. I hated how fast my brain started building stories. On the 7th day, rain came for the first time since I took the tug. It started light in the morning, then steadied into a real soak by afternoon. The harbor turned gray and flat. The tug rocked less, but the air felt colder. I kept the rain catch system running and watched the bucket fill. The first water was dirty from the poncho surface, dust and bird droppings. I dumped that out. The second bucket looked clearer. I filtered it through cloth, then boiled it. It tasted better than the tank water. Rain also changed the shoreline. Sound traveled differently. The city looked washed out. Movement became harder to spot. I stayed inside more, wiping condensation off the wheelhouse windows with a rag, then wiping again, then again. Just before dusk, in that last stretch of daylight where everything looks flat, I saw the man again. He did not signal at first. He moved along the warehouse edge, hunched, stepping around debris. He stopped behind the concrete barrier and stayed there. Then the light appeared, covered and uncovered 3 times. This time the pattern was slower, more careful. I did not answer with light, but I did answer in a way that kept me safer. I started the tug's engine for 10 seconds, then shut it down. A short bark of noise, a test. If the man was watching, he would know I existed and that I had power. If someone else was watching, that noise might also draw attention, but a 10-second burst was less risky than running long. The man froze after the engine sound. He stayed crouched for a full minute, then stood and raised both hands again. He held them up until the light was almost gone. Then he dropped behind cover and disappeared. That was the first moment I believed he was real trouble and real need at the same time. A trap would push harder. A trap would keep signaling, keep baiting. This man moved with caution. That did not clear him, but it changed the odds. The next morning, I made a plan that made me angry. I planned to meet him, not bring him aboard, not save him. Meet him at a distance from the skiff, with the tug kept quiet. If the meeting went bad, I could row away and keep the tug hidden in the open water. If the meeting went well, I could make a second choice later. I spent the day preparing. I checked the skiff for leaks. I tied a second painter line so I could release fast. I put a coil of rope, a water bottle, and a spare life jacket in the skiff. I brought binoculars, a small flashlight with fresh batteries from the harbor office stash, and a flare. I kept the flare buried under gear, not visible. I did not want the first impression to be fire. I waited until late afternoon, when the wind calmed and the rain stopped. The shoreline was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a person pay attention to tiny details. I lowered into the skiff and rowed toward the warehouse area, staying wide, keeping the tug behind me and out of the direct line of sight from shore. When I reached the breakwater gap near the ferry terminal, I stopped and drifted, using the oars to keep position. I did not go closer. I raised the binoculars and scanned the barrier area. The man was there. He stood, slow, hands visible. He looked thinner than I expected. Short hair, dirty face, no hat. Backpack straps tight. He took 2 steps forward, then stopped. He did not wave wild. He just stood and waited. I lifted one hand in a small motion, and then pointed to myself, then pointed to the water, then held up one finger. 1 minute. I do not know if he understood, but he stayed still. I rowed closer until I was maybe 50 yards off the rocks. That distance let me talk without shouting, if wind stayed calm. It also gave me room to turn. I kept the skiff angled outward, bow pointed toward open water. I kept one oar in my right hand even when I stopped rowing, because an oar is also a tool. "Do not come into the water," I called, voice low but firm. "Stay on the rocks." He nodded once. He did not move closer. "I am not trying to swim," he said. His voice carried tiredness, not performance. "My name is Aaron. I saw your boat out there. I have been stuck here." "How long?" "5 days on this side of the harbor," he said. "Longer in the city. I got chased down to the docks. I found this spot because it has cover and a view." "Are you alone?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Not fully. There are infected nearby. There are also people. 2 nights ago I heard a motor, and I heard yelling. I stayed quiet. I did not want them to see me." I kept my eyes on his hands while he spoke. He did not reach into his bag. He did not touch his jacket. He did not step closer. I watched his face for the signs I had learned to fear: the wrong stare, the wrong twitching, the slack mouth. He looked alert. He looked exhausted. He looked human. "What do you want from me?" I asked. I did not soften it. Soft words make hard mistakes. "Water," he said fast. "Food if you can spare it. I can trade. I have tools. I have a knife. I have a small radio that still works sometimes." He swallowed and kept his shoulders steady. "I also need out of here. I cannot stay on shore. People keep moving through. Infected keep drifting in." I glanced along the warehouse line again, checking corners, doors, anything that could hide a watcher. "Show me your hands again," I said. He spread his hands out, palms forward, fingers wide. No visible bite marks on the hands. That did not prove anything, but it was one more detail. "Turn around," I said, slow. He turned, slow, showing the back of his jacket, the pack, the waistband. No weapon visible. He turned back to face me. "I am not here to take your boat," he said. "If I wanted that, I would not stand here calling. I would wait. I do not have a boat to reach you anyway." That was true. But truth can still be used. I kept the skiff where it was. "Why you?" I asked. "Why signal me?" "Because you are anchored out," he said. "You are not tied up. You are not easy. That tells me you are thinking. I watched the docks. I saw the infected drop into the water. I saw one float. I saw you stay out. You did not rush in." He had been watching for days. That landed in my head hard. I nodded once, not agreement, just acknowledgement. "I can give you a bottle of water and some food," I said. "I am not bringing you aboard tonight." His face tightened for a moment. Then he controlled it. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I can work with that." I reached down and pulled a sealed water bottle from the skiff gear. I also pulled 2 packets of crackers. I tied them into a small bundle with rope. I did not throw it. Throwing makes a person step forward to catch. I lowered the bundle into the water slowly, holding the rope, and let it float toward the rocks. "Use the rope," I said. "Pull it in." He crouched, reached down with one hand, and pulled the rope in. He grabbed the bundle, lifted it, and backed away from the edge. He did not tear it open right away. He looked up at me again. "Thank you," he said. The words sounded real. No dramatic tone. Just a man who had been dry too long. "I will be back tomorrow," I said. "Same time. If you are gone, you are gone. If you are here, we talk again." He nodded. "I will be here," he said, "unless I get forced out." I rowed away without turning my back fully. I kept the skiff angled out and put distance between us fast. Only when I was far enough that his face became a blur did I let myself breathe normally again, and even then I did not relax. I went straight back to the tug, climbed aboard, and pulled the skiff tight against the hull so it would not slap in the small waves. That night I did not sleep. My brain kept replaying his words and my own. "He watched you. He is alone. He is not alone. He has a radio. He could be a lure. He could be a man with nothing left except a signal." I checked the harbor in every direction. Twice I thought I saw a light far out near the channel mouth. Then it vanished. It could have been a star low on the horizon. It could have been a boat. The uncertainty sat in my throat and refused to move. In the morning, I did chores to burn off the need to act. I cleaned the deck drains. I checked the engine belts. I tightened a loose clamp on a coolant hose. I tested the windlass. I checked the anchor chain length. I ran the engine for 15 minutes and then shut it down again. Every gallon mattered. Midday, I saw movement on shore near the fuel dock. 3 people, moving in a loose line, carrying something long between them. Maybe a ladder, maybe a plank. They stopped near the gate and looked out toward the water. One pointed. Not at my tug. My tug was too far to pick out in the glare. He pointed toward the marina area, where smaller boats sat tied up. They moved again, heading that direction. That told me enough. People were now working the harbor in groups. Groups meant planning. Planning meant my tug's safety window could close without warning. I went back to Aaron that afternoon, but I did it differently. I moved the tug first, not close to shore, just to a new anchor spot with a different angle to the warehouses. I wanted to avoid being predictable. Then I rowed the skiff in. Aaron was there, tucked behind the barrier again. He looked cleaner, only a little. Rain had helped. He stood when he saw me and kept his hands visible. "You came back," he said. "I said I would," I replied. "You still alone?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "There is a guy moving around the fuel dock with 2 others. I saw them earlier. I do not know them. I stayed out of sight." That matched what I saw. The same facts from 2 angles. That improved his credibility. It did not clear him, but it moved the needle. "What happened to your boat?" I asked. "I never had one," he said. "I worked in a warehouse inland. I ran when it broke. I ended up here because the roads got blocked and the infected started moving in packs. I followed the water because at least there is space here." "Do you have any injuries?" I asked. "Say it straight." He raised his pant leg and showed a scraped shin with dried blood. "Fall on the rocks," he said. "No bites." He pulled his sleeve back and showed his forearm. Dirty, bruised, no marks that looked fresh. I did not move closer. I handed him another bundle, more water, more crackers, a small can of stew this time. He took it and stepped back again. "I can offer you something," he said, voice lower. "I know where there is a small workboat with diesel, not a tug, a maintenance boat. It ran on diesel because it serviced buoys. It is tied behind the Coast Guard shed." I kept my face neutral. "United States Coast Guard shed?" I asked. He nodded. Yeah, this harbor had a small station, just a couple of boats. I saw one from a distance. I also saw fuel drums. If you have a plan, you can get more diesel than what you pulled from the fuel dock. That was valuable information. It was also the kind of bait a smart group would use. I asked the question that mattered. How do you know it is still there? I saw it yesterday morning, he said. I watched for an hour. Nobody came in. Nobody took it. I let the silence sit for a moment. Why tell me? I asked. Because I want a spot on your tug, he said, simple. Not free. I will work. I will take watch. I can row. I can fix small stuff. I used to do forklift maintenance. I know engines enough to be useful. Forklift maintenance is not marine diesel, but it is not nothing. And watch duty is gold when a person is alone. I did not promise him anything. I will think about it, I said. If I bring you aboard, it is strict. No sudden moves, no hidden weapons. You follow my rules, or you go back. He nodded fast. I can do strict, he said. Strict is better than dead on these rocks. I left again, and this time my mind stayed busy with a different tension. Not fear of him, but fear of what I might become if I kept refusing people forever. Refusing is safe until it turns into a habit that eats the person from the inside. That night, just after dark, I saw a boat light near the marina. A small craft moved slowly, no running lights. Only a dim red glow that blinked twice and vanished. It came back again a minute later. Someone was using a covered light to navigate close. That is not a lost person. That is a person trying not to be seen. I watched until the boat slipped behind the breakwater and disappeared. Then I killed every light inside the tug and sat still in the wheelhouse with binoculars and a flare, and my mouth closed, forcing myself to stay quiet. In the morning, I found proof that my tug had been observed. Not boarded, not touched, but observed. A small piece of driftwood was wedged under my anchor chain, where it ran down into the water, tied there with a thin line. It was not something the tide placed perfectly. It looked deliberate, a marker, something that would tell a watcher from far away whether I moved anchor positions during the night. I cut it off and dropped it into the harbor. Then I moved the tug. I started the engine and pulled anchor, chain rattling, windlass groaning. I did not care about quiet in that moment. I cared about breaking patterns. I motored to a new spot closer to the channel mouth, where the water was deeper and the shoreline farther. I dropped anchor again and set it hard. I did not go to Erin that day. I watched the shore and I watched the water. I scanned for small boats. I scanned for smoke. I scanned for movement near the marina and the fuel dock. I saw the same 3 people again near the marina, and this time they had a boat in tow. A small runabout pulled behind them on lines. They were stealing boats. That was now confirmed. Late afternoon, I saw someone else at Erin's spot. Not Erin, a taller man, different build, standing in the open for a full minute, looking out toward the harbor. He held a long object, maybe a pipe, maybe a rifle. I could not tell at that distance. He waved one arm, not a signal, more a casual motion, then pointed toward the water. 2 other figures moved behind him, half hidden. I stayed frozen behind the wheelhouse curtain. My tug was farther out now, harder to see, and I was glad for it. The figures on shore waited. The taller man stepped back behind cover. Then, after a few minutes, Erin appeared, but not standing tall. He crawled out low, kept his head down, and moved behind the barrier again. He did not look in my direction. He looked away toward the warehouses. He looked trapped. That answered the biggest question without words. Aaron was not in control of his shoreline anymore. Someone had found him. Someone might have followed his signals. Someone might have forced him to keep signaling. I stayed offshore and did not move. It felt cruel. It also felt necessary. I kept watching until dusk swallowed details. The taller man came out again and pointed. This time he pointed directly toward where my tug used to anchor. He was wrong. I was not there. He held the point for a long time anyway, then dropped his arm and disappeared. I spent that night preparing to leave the harbor entirely if I had to. I checked charts in the wheelhouse drawer. I found a paper harbor chart and a coastal strip chart. I traced routes with my finger, out past the channel markers, then along the coast where there were small coves and industrial piers. I did not need to go far. I needed to get away from people who were now actively hunting boats. At dawn, I saw Aaron again, alone for a moment. He stood on the rocks and flashed a mirror fast, 3 quick bursts, then 1 long burst. Then he dropped behind cover. That long burst felt different. It felt urgent. It felt forced. I made a decision that was half survival and half debt. I would not bring him straight to the tug. That was too risky now. I would pull him off the rocks and stash him temporarily on a different floating platform, then decide. A barge sat abandoned near the breakwater, a low work barge with no engine, just a flat deck and a couple of storage boxes. It floated on a short anchor line and drifted within a small radius. If I could move Aaron there quietly, he could get off the shore without stepping onto my tug. I waited until late morning when the harbor noise was minimal. I lowered into the skiff with only essentials: water, rope, a small toolkit, 1 flare. I rowed toward Aaron's spot using a wider approach, staying out of direct line from the warehouse corners. I kept my head low and used the skiff's dull metal reflection to blend into the water glare. When I got within 60 yards, Aaron appeared, crouched behind the barrier. He raised one hand, palm out, then pointed behind him and shook his head. He was warning me. I stopped rowing and let the skiff drift, barely moving. I raised binoculars and scanned the warehouse edges. Nothing visible. That did not mean clear. Aaron leaned forward and spoke without raising his voice much. "He is here," he said. "2 men. One has a gun. He told me to keep signaling. He thinks you will come close." That was the most honest thing he could have said if he was honest. If he was part of a trap, he would have stayed quiet and let me drift closer. I nodded once. "Can you move?" I asked. "Not fast," he said. "If I run, he shoots. If I fight, the other man jumps me." I looked at the rocks near Aaron. The waterline was cluttered with debris. A rusted shopping cart half submerged. A rope coil tangled on a post. A broken pallet. I backed the skiff away with short, silent oar strokes. I did not turn around. I moved backward, facing shore, keeping Aaron in view. If I left too fast, the men behind him might panic and fire. A gunshot would pull infected toward the rocks. It would also tell every survivor in the harbor that something valuable was in play. When I was far enough out, I turned the skiff and rowed hard toward the abandoned barge. I reached it in a few minutes, climbed aboard, and looked for anything useful. The storage boxes were locked, but the locks were cheap. I did not break them. I did not need what was inside. I needed a hiding spot. I found a tarp folded under a coil of rope and spread it across 2 low stacks of old fenders, making a crude tent shape. I tied it down, Then I put a water jug and a small bag of food inside. I made the space look empty from a distance. No bright colors, no movement. Then I rowed back toward the rocks, but not directly. I rowed past the rocks first, staying out beyond shouting range, then curved inward at an angle that put the sun glare behind me. I wanted the shoreline watchers to squint. Aaron was still behind the barrier. I saw one of the other men now, crouched behind a dumpster near the warehouse corner. He held something long and dark. It could have been a rifle. It could have been a pipe. But the way he held it suggested he believed it was a rifle. Belief is enough to make a person do irreversible things. I did not speak. I did not wave. I rowed in closer, but I aimed for the debris zone, not for Aaron. I drifted the skiff toward the broken pallet and the rope coil, acting clumsy on purpose, acting unaware. The man behind the dumpster shifted. He leaned forward, watching. He wanted me closer. I let the skiff bump the pallet with a soft thud. I reached down and grabbed the pallet edge with one hand, pulling it closer, making a show of trying to free it from the water. My other hand held the oar steady. My head stayed down. My eyes tracked the dumpster corner through the edge of my vision. The man behind the dumpster stood halfway, then stopped, uncertain. I forced myself to keep the act going for 10 seconds longer. 10 seconds can decide everything. Aaron moved. Not standing, not running. He slid out from behind the barrier and dropped into the shallow water between rocks, moving low. He used the debris cover and the noise of the skiff bumping the pallet. He reached the skiff's stern and grabbed the transom with both hands. I did not react outward. I kept struggling with the pallet, still acting. Aaron pulled himself along the skiff's side and then slipped into the skiff, staying low, head down. He did it fast and quiet. The shoreline man shouted then, a sharp command. I did not wait to understand the words. I shoved the pallet away, dug both oars into the water, and rowed hard toward open water. Aaron stayed crouched in the bottom of the skiff, hands gripping the bench. A crack sound hit the air. Not close, not right overhead. A shot, most likely, fired toward the water. The impact made a small splash 20 yards behind us. Aaron flinched but stayed low. I did not look back. Looking back slows the arms. Slow arms get a person caught in the wrong distance. I rowed toward the barge, not toward the tug. The barge was my buffer. I reached it, hooked the skiff painter line to a cleat, and helped Aaron climb up. He moved stiff, wet clothes clinging, shoes scraping the deck. He kept his voice low. "Do not let him see where you live," he said. "I am not," I said. I pushed him toward the tarp shelter. "Get under that. Sit. Drink slowly." He crawled under the tarp and sat with his knees up. I handed him the water jug and watched him drink in small, controlled swallows. That control mattered. A desperate person gulps and wastes water, or gets sick. He did not. I untied the skiff and rowed away from the barge fast, making a wide circle that would confuse any watcher. I headed toward the tug only after I had doubled back twice, checking for pursuit. I did not see any boat behind me. The shoreline men could not follow without one. That was the point. Back on the tug, I pulled anchor again and moved farther out, near the edge of where the harbor water met the open coast. If those men tried to find me, I wanted more distance and more options. I dropped anchor and shut everything down. Then I sat in the wheelhouse and watched the barge through binoculars. For an hour, nothing happened. Then I saw movement on shore near Aaron's rock spot. The taller man came out, pacing, gesturing with his arms. He pointed toward the harbor again. He pointed toward the marina. He shouted at the other man. No boat came, no rescue for him. He was stuck with his anger and his gun and the water between us. By late afternoon, a new problem appeared. Infected drifted toward the rock line, drawn by the shouting and the earlier shot. They moved slow but steady. 2 of them stumbled over debris and fell. 1 stood again. 1 stayed down and crawled. The shoremen backed away from the edge, forced to change their position. Aaron's old hiding spot became less usable. That was the trade the world offered now. Noise solves one problem and creates 2 more. I waited until full dark to return to the barge. I did not bring the tug close. I rowed the skiff in with a covered flashlight pointed down, using brief flashes to check direction. I reached the barge and climbed aboard. Aaron was still under the tarp, sitting upright, awake. "You stayed," I said, keeping my voice low. "I said I would," he replied. "He came back twice. He shouted. He did not have a boat." I handed Aaron a dry shirt from my spare bag, one I had scavenged days earlier. "Change," I said. "Wet clothes kill a person slowly." He changed under the tarp. When he came back out, I kept the questions coming, because now I needed facts. "Where did you last sleep before the rocks?" "A warehouse office inland," he said. "I left when a group came through looking for supplies. I did not want to get stuck with them." "Any sickness? Fever? Cough?" He shook his head. "No." "Any bites?" "No." He met my eyes and did not look away. "I know why you keep asking." "Good," I said. "Then you know why I keep rules." I did not bring him to the tug that night. Not yet. I left him on the barge with more water and food, and I tied the tarp down tighter so wind would not flap it. Flapping tarp makes sound. Sound draws attention. Back on the tug, I sat in the wheelhouse and wrote a new list on the same scrap paper. If I keep Aaron, I need more water. If I keep Aaron, I need a way to move fast if a group comes by boat. If I keep Aaron, I need to stop anchoring in predictable places. In the morning, Aaron earned his spot without drama. I rowed to the barge and found him already on his feet, tightening knots, adjusting the tarp, cleaning the deck with a rag to remove anything bright. He did not wait to be asked. He did not complain. He did not talk much. He worked. "I can do more," he said, voice steady. "I can help you get fuel from the Coast Guard shed. If we do not, those guys on shore will keep looking. They will find another boat eventually." I watched his hands. Steady, no shaking, no rush. "If we go for fuel, we do it fast and we do it clean," I said. "No hero stuff, no long stop. We take what we can carry and we leave." He nodded. "Agreed." That afternoon, we ran the fuel trip. I moved the tug closer, not to shore, just close enough that rowing distance shortened. Aaron and I took the skiff in together, 2 sets of hands on the oars, switching to keep rhythm quiet. We approached the small Coast Guard station from the waterside, where the dock sat behind a low wall. The station looked abandoned, flags limp, windows cracked. A patrol boat sat tied up, listing slightly, fenders squeaking. Behind it, tucked near a shed, was the maintenance workboat Aaron mentioned. Small, sturdy, diesel inboard, simple. I smelled fuel in the air and felt the pressure in my head ease a fraction. We did not board the patrol boat. We did not need it. We went straight to the shed and found fuel drums inside, plus 2 more jerry cans. Aaron checked the corner shadows with a flashlight sweep, 1 quick second, No movement, no eyes. We filled our cans using a hand pump and a hose we brought. We did not fill to the top. We filled to a carry weight we could move without grunting and stumbling. We loaded the skiff low and balanced. On the way out, we heard voices on shore. Not from the Coast Guard station itself, but farther down near the warehouse line. The same group maybe another. We did not wait to find out. We rowed hard, quiet strokes, no splashing, shoulders working without sound. Back at the tug, we hoisted the fuel aboard using a rope sling and the tug's davit arm. The tug had equipment built for work, and for the first time I felt grateful for every pound of steel in its frame. Aaron ran the rope while I guided the cans through the hatch. No dropped metal, no loud curse, just controlled movement. After we secured the fuel, I made the final decision. Keeping Aaron on a barge was not sustainable. Someone could drift into that barge at night. The barge could drag anchor and drift into shallows. It was a temporary solution, and temporary solutions turn into disasters when a person gets tired. I brought him aboard at dusk, but with rules that stayed strict. He left his backpack in a sealed bin until I searched it with him watching. He kept his hands visible. He accepted my checks without argument. He slept in the berth while I stayed in the wheelhouse. The trust did not appear in one moment. It built through small actions and through his refusal to push. The shoreline men did not disappear. Over the next days, we saw them twice near the marina, once near the fuel dock. They stole boats and argued with each other and fired a gun once into the air, maybe to scare infected away, maybe to scare people. That shot drew infected toward them, and we watched the group scramble back, forced to retreat. They were dangerous, but they were not smart. Aaron and I did not fight them. We did not posture. We left the harbor. We pulled anchor at first light and ran the tug out past the channel markers. The open coast greeted us with larger swells and a colder wind. The tug handled it fine, but the ride was rougher. We kept speed low to save fuel and to avoid drawing attention. We hugged the coastline at a distance that kept us off the shore, but close enough to duck into a cove if weather turned. For a while, the world looked empty. No fishing boats, no ferries, no container ships moving. The horizon was too clean. That clean horizon carried its own pressure. It meant no help was coming. It also meant fewer threats were out here, at least for now. We anchored in a small inlet near a rocky point, far from roads and buildings. The tug sat steady. The water was clearer. We rigged the rain catch again and caught enough to fill 2 jugs after a short coastal drizzle. We rationed the engine run time and used the tug's battery for lights only when fully necessary. We cooked simple meals using a small camp stove Aaron found in his pack, with fuel canisters he had hoarded. He offered them without drama. He did not hold them over my head. One evening, a week after we left the harbor, we saw a light far out on the water, moving slow. We watched it through binoculars until it passed without changing course. We stayed dark. We stayed silent. We let it go. Later that night, Aaron spoke from the berth, voice low, half awake. "If you had not come in that day," he said, "I would have died on those rocks." I kept my eyes on the black water outside the wheelhouse. "If I had come in wrong," I said, "both of us would be dead now." He did not argue. "Yeah," he said, "that is true." Life on the tug settled into work. Every day had tasks. Check anchor, check weather, check fuel, check water, check the hull for new leaks, scrape rust where it started, and cover it with whatever paint we could find, not for beauty, for time. Keep the skiff ready, Keep the deck clear. Keep watching shifts, because sleep is a resource too. The tension never vanished. It just changed shape. It stopped being a man signaling at dusk. It became the awareness that the shore would always have people who wanted what floated. It became the fact that the tug's safe zone only stayed safe if we kept moving, kept thinking, kept refusing to get comfortable. One morning, we found a message in a bottle caught in the inlet reeds. A cheap plastic bottle with paper inside, sealed with tape. Aaron wanted to open it right away. I made him wait until we were back aboard, until we checked the shoreline twice, until we made sure nobody used the bottle as bait. We opened it and found a scrawled note from a woman named Denise saying she was headed north on foot, looking for her brother. Warning of a group taking boats near the old harbor. The date on it was recent. The warning matched what we saw. We did not go back. Weeks later, in a different inlet, under a different gray sky, I caught myself staring at the shore for too long. Aaron nudged the wheelhouse curtain and pointed at the fuel gauge without speaking. He was right. Numbers matter more than staring. I adjusted our plan, marked a new anchor spot on the chart, and moved the tug before habit could root us in place. I still think about that first dusk signal, the flashes between warehouses, the man on rocks betting his life on the hope that somebody offshore was still human. It could have ended in a trap. It could have ended in a gunshot and a sinking skiff. It did not. It ended in work and rules, and a tugboat pointed away from the shore, carrying two survivors who learned to treat silence as a tool, not a comfort. We stay off the shore because the shore is where people gather, and people gather around heat, food, fuel, and fear. Out here, the only thing that gathers is weather. Weather is honest. Weather does not lie with a signal light. Weather just arrives, and we deal with it, one practical step at a time. I do not call this hope. I call it a routine that keeps us alive. I call it a floating safe zone that only stays safe if we keep earning it.